Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, I was speaking about Alert Bay and the fact that they had a curfew. And I said that the curfew was over at midnight. So the kind of story was over, right? Wrong. The state of emergency has been extended by a week, and so the curfew is extended by a week. And I've had some other people reach out and tell me that there are some reserves that have curfews as well. So it's 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. for the curfews. So I mean, that's interesting. I still don't, if you've got everything shut down, I don't understand how a curfew helps. Maybe somebody can help me understand in the comments. What's the reasoning behind the validity of a curfew if everything is shut down? You can't go to a bar. Possibly having late night shopping open would be a benefit because you could have people go in there more spread out, right? You're not like, get to the store because it closes at 9. We have to be home by 9:30 or whatever, right? Like, I don't understand the reasoning behind it. It seems like, well, just power for power's sake, right? Get back to your homes to be safe. I don't know. I don't know. I'll keep you updated to this when the curfews get lifted. If somebody's got a link for a reserve that's on curfew, please do send it my way. I didn't have time to look this morning, and I apologize. Usually I've got a link for something like that, but I don't have a link. So I will look for one, and I'll have one tomorrow probably. Elizabeth May gets a little bit ratioed on her Twitter feed here. Thanks. She's talking about the Planet of the Humans. So this is in response to Daryl Hannah, who says, Planet of the Humans takes advantage of those who don't have an in-depth or nuanced understanding of renewable regenerative solutions and may unfortunately lead many to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Such a shame. I'm writing a piece on it. Stay tuned. And she says, Elizabeth May says, thanks. We need to explain and expose how much damage this film could do. And I mean, she's a former Green Party leader. So yeah, of course she's cheering for the hate for this film. I'm about half an hour in and I'm already, my eyebrows are raised. And a lot of this confirms a lot of things that I've looked at and talked about. I focused a lot more on the modeling and the fact that the data itself doesn't bear out when you compare it to the models, the temperature increase, et cetera, blah, 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 all that stuff. Regardless, this is looking at green energy and the subsidies poured into the green energy. And when you really take another or closer look at these green energy from battery to windmills or wind turbines, all of that stuff, to ethanol, when you peel it back a little bit, it all relies on fossil fuels. And you're using it to replace fossil fuels? How does that make any sense? It relies on fossil fuels. So, this is a whole segment, this whole 3 minutes here. I'll move myself over here. I didn't even realize I could do that. Anyway, that's cool. Anyway, this whole segment here is talking about, this guy is a guy who is talking about how you make solar panels, and when you make solar panels, they sell it like they're using sand, but they're not using sand. They're using quartz and coal. So, I mean, it's a very interesting, eye-opening look at this industry. And I'm only half an hour in. Elizabeth May hates it and is getting ratioed hard on that tweet. People are fed up with the lies and the mistruths and if only we could spend a little bit more money, we could stop the reliance on these fossil fuels. And it's not true. It's just not true and provably not true. So, and this goes through. Now I'm waiting for the turn on this. I'm waiting for the bait and switch. Sometimes when you get a concerned troll or somebody who's trying to get on your side, right, they'll show you a whole bunch of things that seem to agree with what you think. And then they'll start trying to turn your opinion. That's a concerned troll, right? I'm really worried, I agree with you, but I'm really worried that blah, blah. You can see it sometimes in my comments. It's quite funny. But when you spot those kind of things, and I mean, people aren't above doing this with a movie, right? To concern troll with a movie, I mean, that's just propaganda 101, right? Like you get on the side of of your audience. So far, I think it's good. I'm waiting for the turn. I'm doing a Twitter thread on it. You can have a read if you're interested. And you can find that on Twitter. I don't think I'll put the link in the description. Okay, here is CBC. This is a quick headline. Alerting people about gunman's fake police car sooner may have saved lives, RCMP commissioner says. How is the incompetence tolerated throughout this government? Regardless of what they thought they knew, and the RCMP thought that the killer had committed suicide and was in a burned out building. But regardless of that, wouldn't you then release a public statement saying, blah, 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 this is what happened? And that didn't happen either. So the story's not adding up. Commissioner Lucky seems to be grasping at straws, out of her depth, completely unaware that the situation and the statements that are being made make this police force look more and more incompetent and more corrupt. And there's more and more concerning things coming out daily. And I don't know. The military is going to investigate. I don't know. I don't know how this one's going to end, but I'm going to keep watching this one because it's an interesting story, because it's absolutely crazy. The tragedy aside, the tragedy is its own story, right? The tragedy is the theme that they want you to go with, right? Like, oh no, this happened and we'll be strong together and blah, blah, blah. That's the way the newspapers kind of want you to go. But this is so outside of what is expected that this is becoming the story. The incompetence of the RCMP, the changing stories, the rogue officers firing weapons at the building. Who are they? Do we have badge numbers for these officers? Does the RCMP know who they are? What happened to them? Are they currently off on leave? Have they stopped being RCMP officers? Did they have to hand in their weapons for shooting up a building? How come I haven't heard any more about that? So many questions. So it's a weird story, and I'm going to keep following it. Here it is. First ministers agree to draft national guidelines on reopening the economy. I think that's an important aspect, and I'm glad that they're starting to talk about it. It's more than about a month after the whole lockdown began, right? Okay, here we go. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Canada's premiers agreed to work towards a jointly drafted set of national guidelines on reopening the economy during their weekly conference calls this afternoon. Federal and provincial sources say they hope to have a common set of guiding principles finalized by next week. We ought to signal to Canadians that there is a national standard, a national way of doing things, even if they are going to happen at different times, said a senior federal official speaking on background. I think there was a broad consensus as long as there's flexibility. Flexibility will be critical as several provinces are already taking steps to revive their economies. Saskatchewan and New Brunswick have released multi-step plans. Ontario and Quebec are poised to do the same next week. Today is Saturday, the 25th, just in case you're wondering. A degree of flexibility. New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs confirmed the Prime Minister and asked the premiers to submit ideas to develop national guidelines with the goal of moving quickly. It's certainly relevant to have a national program that we follow. As you recall, I was looking for that sort of standardization on the other end of this pandemic, so we would have some consistency across the country, Higgs told Power and Politics host Vasi Kapoulas. Scrolling down just a bit more. But the sense at the federal level is that each province takes steps to reopen, there needs to be some set of common guidelines for companies operating in multiple jurisdictions or across provincial borders. The same sorts of markers are going to be important as they make their decisions, the federal official said. They will know what reopening the stores looks like. In addition to the Saskatchewan and New Brunswick plans, the federal government has circulated a set of draft guidelines that could form the basis of a joint document. The federal guidelines were prepared largely by the Public Health Agency of Canada and include feedback from provincial medical officers. People want to continue to see everybody working together on this, said a provincial source who listened to the conference call. And then it talks about kind of other related things, but outside of getting things back started. But at least they're talking about it. At least there'll be guidelines. At least there are a few provinces that are looking at getting back to normal, whatever normal looks like now. And hopefully it looks a lot like it did, right? Hopefully people will just wear masks until this thing goes away. And hopefully we won't have to institute any more lockdowns once we open everything back up. I'm going to talk about Dr. Tam and the continued response from everyone across the board. And then Dr. Tam responds, and Mr. Sloan has a further interview that clarifies what he meant. So here's Jagmeet Singh, and he says, and so the leader of the NDP, I think this is weird. When Dr. Tam doesn't engage with this, Dr. Tam's not engaging with Mr. Sloan. Why is everybody white knighting for her? Like, this is the weirdest thing ever. Imagine if this was a middle-aged white person, not male or female, just white, doesn't matter. Would all of these politicians be white knighting? Like, it's a really odd thing for all of the politicians to jump in and say, hold on, you can't say that, that's racist, she's Asian. Did you notice she's Asian? You can't say that, she's Asian. It's really weird. It's really, really weird, especially considering her job performance. Her job performance has been abysmal. So what's going on with the politicians riding in on their trusty steed, right? Here's Jagmeet Singh. Let's go. From the beginning of this crisis, we've heard horrible stories of abused of abuse faced by Asian Canadians, particularly those of Chinese descent. There is no question that MP Sloan's comments against Dr. Theresa Tam fuel this kind of racism. Andrew Scheer needs to clearly denounce this. Andrew Scheer needs to get up on this horse with me right now and sit behind me and denounce it. White knight with me, Andrew Scheer. It's so weird. It's such a strange thing. Here's Dr. Tam being asked, what do you think about this whole thing? And she calls it noise. That's her definition. Here we go.
Pretty focused person, and I work really, really hard. So, probably over 20 hours a day just to my singular focus is to work with all of my colleagues to get this epidemic wave under control. I don't let noise sort of detract me from doing that. So that's how I work. And I think, as I took on this job, I know that, as I say, the population is my patient. So this is how I look at the Canadian population. And I'd never do this alone. So as the CPHO, I harness the power of the collective to promote health and prevent illness and control outbreaks. And so that much I know is that I only represent a very small aspect of the public health response in Canada, and I'm really proud that I'm part of it.
And she was the cornerstone that said borders don't work. We can not close the border and the virus will be here just the same, except for the fact that Taiwan closed the border and told the WHO about this in December of 2019, December 30th of 2019, and then closed their border. And they have less than 500 cases and a small number of deaths. And Ontario's entire economy is closed because we listened to this person's advice through the WHO, or the WHO through Ms. Tam. And our economy is closed, and people's businesses are failing. People are looking at bankruptcy and all sorts of terrible, terrible consequences. So, I mean, the noise is criticism of your job, madam. The noise actually is all of these white knighting politicians making this about your race and not your terrible, terrible job that you've done. It's awful. It's terrible. Oh, I don't know which side I like, left or right. Ooh, I'm going to go back here for now. Okay. Here's Derek Sloan, and he says, I won't be issuing an apology. And so we'll read through. Embattled rookie MP for Hastings and Lennox and Addington, Derek Sloan says his controversial criticism of Canada's top doctor's handling of COVID-19 was about her job performance, not about her race. The leadership candidate for the Conservative Party of Canada is standing by his assertion. Dr. Theresa Tam, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, should be pink-slipped for following slow-footed COVID-19 countermeasures by the World Health Organization. He believes delayed swifter protection for Canadians against the disease. In an exclusive interview Friday with The Intelligencer, Sloan said he will not apologize for his April 21st tweet and video querying whether Hong Kong-born Tam was working for the Chinese government as she responded earlier this year to a growing pandemic. I scroll down a little bit. Quote, when I made the statement, obviously the idea people would think it was racist was not even on my mind. I would have said those statements about any public health officer that made those decisions in her spot, Sloan said. It had nothing to do with her background. I have concerns about the way Dr. Tam has responded to the pandemic. I have concerns about the World Health Organization being sort of beholden to China, at least parroting this information from China. It has nothing to do with Dr. Tam's background, what her ethnicity is. Outside of there being a lot of hysteria right now, I'm not sure where all the confusion came from, Sloan said. I can tell you, it's all the white knighting MPs. It's all those people who were saying, oh, don't you see, she's Asian. That's where the confusion came from. They wanted it to be confusing, so they put out all those tweets. They were told to put out those tweets, right? This is politics after all. I'm going to scroll down here. Echoing complaints by American President Donald Trump, who has stopped $400 million in WHO funding, that the health organization was in lockstep with China's alleged mishandling of the virus. Sloan said Canada's federal health team followed the WHO's advice for weeks in the early days of the outbreak when it could have acted much more quickly. I just wanted to show you here, in the wake of Donald Trump's defunding of the WHO, EU, CP24 is reporting, expects Canada to help it cover WHO funding shortfall caused by Trump. Actually, it was caused by the WHO's complete mishandling of the situation that then had Donald Trump suspend funding because they mismanaged the situation. That's like saying your boss is responsible for you getting fired, right? Like that's like saying that awful Mr. Burns fired me because I melted down the plant, right? Like it's
Report in the Globe and Mail not too long ago today that says that 1 million masks supposed to be rated to the K95 standard for respirators, arrived in Canada and were found to be not up to the standard needed for healthcare workers. Is that the total number of masks, defective masks? Are there more? Have you found other equipment that's coming from China that's defective?
Look, we know there'll be challenges when we procure from abroad. That's why we're building strong domestic capacity. One such example is Medicom, a company that we invested in to help scale up their facilities right here in Montreal for N95 masks and surgical masks as well. So we're building up strong domestic capacity, mobilizing industry to make sure we have made in Canada solutions that will protect Canadian frontline healthcare workers.
I take your point on that, Minister, but that domestic effort, while vigorous, is going to take a lot of time, which is something that your government has pointed out. It will take some time. In the meantime, you are procuring a significant portion of PPE from China. How much more of it, beyond these 1 million masks, is defective?
Look, I can tell you right now, we're going to have challenges from procuring items from around the world, and there's going to be challenges with respect to the quality. But what I'm also saying is that because the domestic capacity that we're building up, in which in many cases the delivery is happening in days, not weeks, and so we're building up that capacity to offset some of those challenges that we will encounter from procuring that essential equipment from abroad.
With respect, that didn't answer my question, Minister. Is there more beyond those 1 million masks that Canada has bought and received from China that has proven to be defective?
Vashi, look, we recognize that there's going to be some challenges when we procure from abroad. We know that international supply chains are compromised. It's not only about China, but the United States and Europe and other parts of the world where we're procuring items from. That is why we're building domestic capacity. We know that these international and global demand for this very important PPE is under a lot of stress. And so building that domestic capacity is something that we've been working on for months now, and I'm confident that we'll continue to protect frontline healthcare workers.
A little bit of overuse of the word challenges there, but fundamentally didn't answer the question, right? How many masks were defective? Are there more masks than the original 1 million that were defective? Can't answer the question. And just continues back on the talking points. Just like usual, just like most Liberals, the Liberal tap dance continues. So I'm going to mention some things at the end. Check out Speaking Moistly. Speaking Moistly is up, and I thought it was really fun and funny. I did a Twitter thing that sounded like it was just Greg doing Speaking Moistly. It's actually me and Greg, so that's kind of funny. But check it out, speakingmoistly.co. And there's a YouTube channel. You can subscribe. That would be cool. And we'll be doing another show on Thursday. And also, you can download Speaking Moistly and Canada Poly from any podcast place where you can find podcasts. So just in case you're sick and tired of YouTube not notifying you about my show, it will be delivered directly to your phone. Audio only though, so I don't do a video podcast feed. Do those exist? I don't think those exist. If they do exist, I'll put one up. And last bit, thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful